Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Failing to Success. I'm your host, Chad Kalecki with Cosmic Design and Development. Today on the show, we have Michael Fontaine. His company is called Falcon Project Consultants, and they drive operational excellence for municipal and industrial clients. So, you were just telling me about the story of the refineries that you used to drive by growing up as a kid. Could you share that with us, Michael?
Yes, absolutely. Michael Fontaine, the Falcon Project Consultants. And growing up as a kid, I was actually born in a small island city called Galveston. And as we would either leave Houston and head to Galveston or go from Galveston to Houston, we would always pass by the refineries and the petrochemical plants and the different manufacturing facilities. And it always intrigued me as a kid. I would see the smoke plumes come out, and I would always be intrigued by two things. Firstly, I knew that they were major economic drivers for the region. So many people needed them for jobs, and we needed them for the equipment and the things they produce. But on the other hand, we also knew they polluted the water, they polluted the air. And typically speaking, people fall on one end of the spectrum. People are stark environmentalists and don't want the plants to be there, or other people fall typically on the other end of the spectrum and they really see the economic viability of them. However, I really fell somewhere in the middle. I wanted to really bring about the operational efficiency of the plants to make sure that they can operate from a commercial perspective and be profitable so that people can have jobs. But also, I knew that they could operate more efficiently, then they could still get the output they needed without adversely impacting the air, without impacting people's health, and without adversely impacting the environment. And that's something that really drove me to do what I do to this day. And it's something that really inspires me even to this very moment. And I enjoy it. I love every moment of it.
So, what was your path in getting started in the industry?
So academically, a couple of things. As a kid, I took a lot of science and math courses. I was involved with a couple of groups like SECME and other engineering type of groups. And through those organizations, I learned more about engineering per se. And I also got to go on field trips to water facilities, to refineries. I got to see how they operated from an inside out perspective. And over the years, I also met many different people who worked at the plants. And so, from that inside information, if you will, I learned more about the operations. I learned more about the markets. I eventually got a degree in economics, so I learned more about the global petrochemical markets, the global energy markets, and I learned more about how the region really depends on more or less our number one import, our number one export are the things that we make is what we call the 225 corridor or along those Gulf Coast refineries, and really just found over the years ways to maintain the economic viability, but also to make them competitive with plants abroad and other parts of the country so that we can maintain, again, from a very selfish perspective, the jobs and the local economy. But again, also from a very selfish perspective, as someone who loves the outdoors, the beaches and the clean air and the communities, because those communities are the people that are my family, the people that I love and care about. And so we need the waters to fish and for recreation. And for some people, they're fishermen, and so their commercial livelihood. But then also the plants themselves also provide a lot of the products that we need here, from coatings on airplanes and the hospital equipment for another big part of the industry here, which is the medical center. And even for things like the food that we eat, a lot of those plants make a lot of the fertilizers and a lot of the things that are just really critical and just really mission critical elements for our economy and for our society. And just moreover, these facilities are faced with many different constraints. And among those constraints are things like a labor shortage, skill shortage, a technology shortage. And oftentimes what I find is, Chad, these plants know how to do what they do extremely well, but they don't know how to maybe work in an environment where a lot of their more talented people are aging out. And so they may need ways to do what they're doing in a more efficient way. And that's where Falcon comes in. From things like industrial water treatment, from things like operational excellence. So in a non-technical way, basically doing more with fewer resources at a high level, and also reducing the environmental impact. And all of that drives also a financial cost. And so here locally, we have, for example, the TCEQ, which is basically the Texas version of nationally what we may know of as the EPA. And these different plants want to make sure they're in compliance. And then also, just from a pure economic perspective, these different facilities want to make sure that they can just operate more efficiently and that they can be profitable and that they can compete with the ever growing threats from, again, as I was mentioning before, different types of technology, different geographic locations. And typically what I find is that wherein most suppliers really just come in and provide an alternative widget or just really come in and say, are you looking for a type of role? What I find is these facilities really come to Falcon for the expertise and the people, the processes, and the technology to really drive a more efficient way of doing business, a more sustainable way of doing business, and a much more cost effective way of doing business.
So, what jumped you into starting your own business and helping these municipalities deal with these issues?
Yeah, absolutely. So earlier in my career, I actually worked for the fourth largest city in the United States, the city of Houston. And so I got a firsthand inside look at what big cities do and, where they can possibly do things a little bit better. Also, earlier in my career, I worked for the U.S. subsidiary of the world's largest oil company, Aramco. And again, I got a firsthand look at what they do excellent and what they could possibly do a little bit better. And when I looked around the market, I saw a lot of smart people, a lot of great companies, but I just really saw ways that the market wasn't being addressed. And I just looked at the world and I said, if it is to be, it's up to me. And so I really wanted to go out and attack those areas. And so that's what we do. And in areas, for example, in industrial water treatment, providing chemical injection skids to really improve the operations. Moreover, beyond that, for an example, tying that to controls equipment that enable plant operators to get data from their system to provide predictive analytics so they can not only see where material or equipment may fail, but also to provide predictive analytics so they can understand what they can do to prevent things from even occurring. And then also sometimes the plants may not have the personnel or the expertise. And we're able to come in with the personnel and the expertise to provide them with an outside vision, to provide them with increased human resources expertise, to enable them to do things that they may not be able to do with the resources and the technical capacity that they may have in-house. And these are just the two examples of ways that we are able to help plants that in our world are household names, but provide products that really help people the world over.
So, your goal is always to come in and optimize efficiency within their existing systems.
Within their existing systems, but sometimes they need an additional system or a new system. And one example of that is an industrial water treatment. A lot of times, plants may be operating in an environment where they're doing, for example, a process where they may be doing like coagulation and flocculation for their industrial water treatment. We can come in and provide a system wherein there's no chemical injection. We can eliminate the odor. We can also eliminate sludge, and we can also reduce their electricity costs. And this is an example of the type of technology that we can introduce to these facilities that may not even know exists. And so, to your point, we can either improve the existing process, or oftentimes we can even show them a new way of doing things that they weren't aware. Because when you understand that these people, they're very smart people, very talented, but they tend to work within their silo. But because we have a more holistic industry look and we're coming with different ideas because we have a wider swath of applications that we're typically working with, we can bring new ideas and innovations and introduce synergies and offer a level of expertise and perspective that they may not have internally.
So, you're coming in and you're introducing these technologies. So, you're, let's say, going to the company that manufactures this new innovative system and you're connecting them with your client. Is that how that process works?
So it just depends on the application. So typically the way that it works is the actual relationship is going to be with Falcon and the actual facility. Let's just say hypothetically, I'm not going to say the name of the client, but it's one you might know. Let's just say in this case, a petrochemical plant. The relationship is with the petrochemical plant and with Falcon. And the first thing that we typically do is we come in and understand what they're doing currently, and we understand where they are trying to go. And so the solution or the remedy might be the people they may need to improve, enhance, or change out, or the process they may need to improve or introduce a new process, or they may need to modify or change or upgrade the technology, or maybe some combination, elaboration of the three. And so it's not one cookie cutter. We come in. So basically, a combination or elaboration or some combination of the three, and really to help them achieve what they want to achieve technically and commercially and safely to achieve their goals.
What would your advice be to maybe some young people out there that want to get into the energy space and start a business eventually in the space?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, firstly, I would say they really need to ask themselves why. And I would really say start with why, because the space is so large and so massive that there's so many different unique problems that can be solved. And whatever interests you the most is what you're going to be most passionate about. And that's where you're probably going to drive the most value. Moreover, I would say visit my website, www.falconprojectconsultants.com. Connect with us. And there's a lot of good resources, technical and commercial, where young people can learn more about the industry. And then also, if there's a question that they may have that they don't see, they can also reach out, and our team can also produce that content and maybe provide them with the resources, either Falcon resources or third-party resources to help answer their questions.
Well, I was going to ask how people reach out to you, Michael, but now we know. And
Yes,
probably on
yes.
LinkedIn as well.
Yes, on LinkedIn. So the website again is www.falconprojectconsultants.com. You can also on the website sign up to join our newsletter. You can also call me directly at 713-425-6497. And on LinkedIn, I can also be found there as well.
All right, we're going to be blowing up your phone, Michael.
Okay.
So
Yeah, that sounds good. Sounds good.
thanks, Michael, for being on the show. And thank you, everybody, for listening to another episode of Failing to Success. I'm your host, Chad Kalecki with Cosmic Design and Development. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.